Rome welcomed countless gods, but it punished the wrong beliefs. In an empire where religion meant loyalty, refusing a single ritual could mark you as a threat to the state. This is the hidden history of the people Rome tolerated, until it didn't. Chapter 1. Rome's myth of religious tolerance. Rome's reputation for religious tolerance was carefully constructed, and widely believed. As the Roman Republic expanded across the Mediterranean and later transformed into an empire, its rulers rarely forced conquered peoples to abandon their gods. Instead, Rome absorbed them. Foreign deities were identified with Roman counterparts, granted temples, and incorporated into public rituals through a process later called interpretatio Romana. To Rome, this was not generosity. It was governance. By allowing local gods to survive, Rome reduced resistance and maintained order. Religion became a tool of integration. Cities in Gaul, Hispania, Greece, and the eastern provinces continued their traditional worship, now framed within Roman authority. This created the image of an empire comfortable with diversity, where belief appeared flexible and inclusive. But Roman tolerance was never about freedom of conscience. It was about function. Religion in Rome was public, visible, and regulated. Rituals reinforced social hierarchy, civic duty, and loyalty to the state. Participation mattered more than belief. One could worship many gods, foreign gods, even contradictory gods, so long as those practices did not disrupt public order or challenge Roman supremacy. Problems arose when belief could not be managed. Religions that rejected public ritual, refused integration, or demand exclusive loyalty fell outside Rome's system. These beliefs exposed the limits of tolerance. Rome did not fear unfamiliar gods. It feared communities whose faith operated beyond its control. The myth of tolerance endured because it worked for Rome. It masked a system where acceptance depended on obedience, and diversity was permitted only when it strengthened imperial stability. Beneath the appearance of openness lay a rigid truth. Religion was welcome in Rome only if it served the empire first. Chapter 2. Religion as control. Why belief was political in Rome. Religion functioned as a system of governance. Temples stood beside courthouses. Priests were magistrates. Augurs advised generals and senators before battles, elections, and laws. Every major political act was framed by ritual, reinforcing the idea that Rome's authority was sanctioned by the gods themselves. To participate in these rites was not simply an expression of belief, it was an affirmation of belonging. Public religion bound society together through repetition and visibility. Festivals marked the calendar. Sacrifices took place in open spaces. Processions moved through streets crowded with spectators. These rituals reminded citizens and subjects alike that Rome's power was ancient, divinely protected, and shared by all who lived under its rule. Refusing to participate disrupted that message. This is why religious dissent was treated as a political problem. 2. Decline a sacrifice, to avoid a festival, or to reject an oath sworn by the gods suggested disloyalty. Roman law did not criminalize belief itself, but it punished behavior that appeared to undermine public order. What mattered was not what one believed privately, but what one refused to do publicly. The imperial cult sharpened this logic. Beginning with Augustus in the late 1st century BCE, loyalty to the emperor was increasingly expressed through ritual honors, burning incense to the genius of the emperor, or participating in imperial ceremonies was a symbolic act, but its meaning was unmistakable. It declared submission to Roman authority. The unspoken rule was clear. One could worship many gods, foreign gods, even private gods, as long as Rome's rituals came first. Belief was tolerated. Independence was not. Chapter 3. The Jews of Rome, tolerated, watched, and isolated. Jewish communities had existed in Rome for centuries before the empire reached its height. By the 1st century BCE, synagogues operated openly in the city of Rome, and Jewish populations were established across the Mediterranean, from Alexandria to Asia Minor. Unlike many other groups, Jews were granted specific legal exemptions. Roman authorities recognized the antiquity of Jewish law and allowed Jews to abstain from certain civic rituals, including sacrifices to Roman gods. Yet this protection came with unease. Judaism's strict monotheism set it apart from Rome's pluralistic religious culture. Jews did not adopt Roman gods, did not participate in public sacrifices, and observed customs, such as dietary laws and Sabbath rest, that reinforced communal separation. To Roman observers, this distinctiveness appeared insular and resistant to integration. Tensions intensified as Rome tightened control over Judea. Revolts against Roman rule in 66 to 73 CE, and again in 132 to 135 CE transformed Jewish identity in the Roman imagination. These were not minor uprisings but large-scale conflicts that required massive military responses. After the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE, Jewish communities across the empire came under closer scrutiny. Rome did not outlaw Judaism, but it redefined its place. Special taxes were imposed, most notably the Fiscus Judaicus, redirecting temple contributions to Roman coffers. Public suspicion grew, fueled by association with rebellion rather than belief. Jews were tolerated as an ancient people, but monitored as a potentially disloyal one. Their survival depended on a fragile balance, legal recognition paired with permanent watchfulness. Faith practiced openly but never without consequence. Chapter 4. Mystery Cults. Belonging in the shadows beyond Rome's official temples existed a different religious world, one defined by privacy rather than public ritual. Mystery cults spread throughout the empire, offering initiates personal salvation, protection in the afterlife, or a sense of belonging unavailable in state religion. Among the most prominent were the cults of Isis from Egypt, Mithras from the eastern provinces, and Cybele from Anatolia. These cults attracted those often marginalized by traditional Roman structures. Soldiers found meaning in Mithraism's emphasis on loyalty and brotherhood. Enslaved people and freedmen were drawn to Isis, whose cult promised divine care. Regardless of social status, women, excluded from many civic religious roles, found greater participation within these traditions. Initiation was central. Unlike public Roman rites, mystery cult ceremonies were closed to outsiders. Participants swore oaths of secrecy, shared symbolic meals, and underwent rituals known only to fellow initiates. This secrecy did not imply rebellion, but it created private bonds beyond the state's view. Roman authorities tolerated many mystery cults, until secrecy became unsettling. The Senate's suppression of the Bacchanalia in 186 BCE revealed deep anxieties about uncontrolled gatherings and unmonitored loyalties. Although later cults were often permitted, they were closely observed, especially during periods of unrest. Rome did not fear new gods. It feared private communities that operated without public oversight. Mystery cults offered emotional fulfillment and personal identity, but in doing so, they highlighted a fundamental tension: the human desire for meaning beyond the structures of power. Chapter 5. When belief became a crime. Crackdowns and bans. Rome's tolerance was most fragile in moments of crisis. War, famine, plague, or political instability often triggered a search for causes, and religion became an easy target. When traditional rituals seemed to fail, authorities questioned not the gods, but those who did not honor them properly. The Senate and emperors responded with decrees that drew clear boundaries between acceptable worship and dangerous belief. The suppression of the Bacchanalia in 186 BCE set an early precedent. The cult was accused of secret meetings, moral corruption, and conspiracies against the state. Whether these charges were exaggerated or not, the response was decisive. Shrines were destroyed, gatherings banned, and leaders executed or imprisoned. Later crackdowns followed a similar pattern. Foreign cults were periodically expelled from Rome, only to return years later under stricter supervision. Astrology, divination, and unauthorized prophecy were targeted because they threatened imperial authority by predicting political change. Religion became a scapegoat for uncertainty. What mattered was not theology, but control. Beliefs that could not be regulated, taxed, or publicly displayed were labeled subversive. Once a religion was framed as a source of disorder, legal protections vanished quickly. Worship became evidence. Participation became guilt. These moments reveal the true limits of Roman tolerance. It was conditional, reversible, and shaped by fear. When stability was threatened, the empire chose suppression over accommodation, using religion as both explanation and excuse for violence. Chapter 6: Early Christians, the ultimate outsiders. Early Christianity emerged within the Roman world as a small Jewish sect, but its rapid spread transformed it into something Rome struggled to categorize. Christians did not reject religion itself, they rejected all gods except one. This refusal placed them outside every established Roman worship. They did not sacrifice in temples, did not honor local deities, and did not participate in festivals that defined civic life. To Roman authorities, this behavior was not private belief, but was public defiance. Christians were accused of atheism for denying the gods, and of disloyalty for refusing to honor the emperor's divine status. Their meetings, held in private homes or secluded spaces, fed rumors. Roman writers like Tacitus and Pliny the Younger recorded accusations of antisocial behavior, secret rituals, and moral corruption, often based on misunderstanding rather than evidence. Persecution was not constant or empire-wide. It was local, episodic, and driven by circumstance. Governors were instructed to punish Christians who refused to recant when formally accused, not to actively hunt them. Yet this legal ambiguity created danger. A single denunciation could lead to interrogation, imprisonment, or execution. Martyrdom became central to Christian identity, not by design, but by consequence. Public executions were meant to enforce conformity, yet they often strengthened Christian communities by demonstrating unwavering conviction. By the 3rd century, Christianity had spread across cities, armies, and households. Rome attempted to suppress the movement without fully understanding it. In doing so, it inadvertently preserved the very faith it sought to control. Chapter 7: Everyday Life as a Religious Minority. For most religious minorities in Rome, persecution was not a constant spectacle but a daily calculation. Survival depended on discretion. Belief was practiced quietly, often within homes, workshops, or tightly knit neighborhoods. Archaeological evidence, from household shrines to inscriptions, shows that faith was woven into ordinary life, not displayed openly in defiance of authority. Many adapted by blending in. Jews gathered in synagogues that functioned as religious, social, and legal centers, carefully maintaining recognized customs while avoiding public provocation. Mystery cult initiates met at night or in designated spaces, separating religious identity from civic appearance. Christians assembled in private houses, sharing meals and worship beyond the gaze of officials. Family pressure was constant. Roman households were religious units, bound by shared rituals honoring household gods and ancestors. Refusal to participate could fracture families, threaten inheritance, or expose individuals to accusation. For enslaved people and freedmen, religious affiliation carried additional risk, as loyalty to a non-Roman god could be interpreted as disobedience to a master. Faith offered comfort, but it also created vulnerability. A neighbor's suspicion, a local crisis, or a magistrate's inquiry could turn private practice into public danger. Most minorities did not seek confrontation. They sought continuity, preserving belief without attracting attention. These lives rarely appear in Roman histories. Yet they formed the silent foundation of religious persistence, proving that endurance, not rebellion, was the most common response to power. Chapter 8: Absorption, Erasure, and Survival. Over time, Rome dealt with religious difference not through a single policy, but through gradual absorption or quiet erasure. Some belief systems survived by adapting. Foreign gods were rebranded, merged with Roman deities, and stripped of elements that challenged public order. The cult of Isis, once restricted and expelled, eventually gained imperial favor. Mithraism spread through the army, its rituals tolerated as long as they remained politically neutral. In these cases, survival required accommodation. Other traditions left fewer traces. Small sects disappeared without formal bans, absorbed into local practices or abandoned as communities dissolved. Their beliefs are known today only through hostile references or fragmentary inscriptions. Silence, not destruction, became their legacy. History remembered what Rome preserved, and forgot what it ignored. Christianity followed a different path. Once persecuted as a threat to unity, it became a tool of unity itself. The conversion of Constantine in the early 4th century, and the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, transformed Christianity from a legal sect to protected religion. By the end of the century, under Theodosius I, it became the empire's official faith. The balance of power reversed. Formerly marginalized believers now shaped law, doctrine, and memory. This shift did not restore forgotten religions, it replaced them. Temples were closed, rituals banned, and older traditions redefined as superstition. Survival came at a cost. The empire that once regulated belief now enforced orthodoxy. Rome's religious history is not a story of progress, but of power changing hands, deciding which beliefs endured, and which vanished without record. Chapter 9, Rome's Forgotten Lesson. The religious minorities of Rome expose a contradiction at the heart of imperial power. Rome did not rule through uniform belief, yet it never allowed belief to exist beyond its control. Tolerance was not a moral principle, it was a strategy. As long as religious practice reinforced stability, hierarchy, and loyalty, it was permitted. When it challenged those foundations, it became a threat. This pattern was not unique to ancient Rome. It reflects a recurring tension in large states, the desire to appear inclusive, while maintaining authority over identity and allegiance. Rome's experience shows how easily tolerance can shift into surveillance and accommodation, into suppression, without the language of freedom ever being used. The voices of those who lived under this system are faint, but their experiences shaped the empire's evolution. Jews preserved their traditions despite dispersion and pressure. Mystery cults met human needs unmet by state ritual. Christians endured persecution and ultimately reshaped the empire's religious landscape. Each group reveals how belief can persist even when constrained by power. What Rome chose to remember, and what it allowed to disappear, was determined by those who governed. History followed authority, not numbers. Entire communities survived without monuments, without official recognition, and often without names. Remembering these minorities is not an act of nostalgia. It is a reminder that religious freedom has rarely been absolute, and that control over belief has long been a tool of governance. Rome's lesson endures. Empires may tolerate difference, but only on their own terms. Rome's greatest power was never its armies, it was control. Control over memory, control over belief, and control over which stories survived. The religious minorities of Rome lived at the edge of that power, tolerated only as long as they remained useful. If you want more histories that empires tried to bury, stories told without myth, without fantasy, and without shortcuts, subscribe to Silent Scholars. These are not legends, these are the truths history left behind.